Just kind of guide him along and be a good mentor for him. And that's pretty good. I think it's good. It'll do Jalen Hurts well to have a veteran in there like Joe Flacco, a guy who's won a Super Bowl. He's won a world championship with the Baltimore Ravens. And I think it'll be good.
It's a 1-year deal. What stress does this put on Joe for the next season or seasons to come in his career?
At this stage of his career, he had the injury, some injuries, and he's been bounced around. He bounced around to Denver. He bounced around to the New York Jets, and now he's down with Philadelphia after some really good years with the Ravens. Again, won them a championship. I would think that he would want to be a starter again. 1 year, it's $3.5 million. I think he can get up to $4 more million in incentives. So, if he's the backup to Jalen Hurts, the time he would get would be if Jalen suffers, if he struggles, and they have to put Joe Flacco in there. Well, we don't want Jalen Hurts. Heaven forbid he should get hurt, and then Joe Flacco gets the starting nod that way.
Is there any coming back, honestly, for Joe Flacco from a backup to a starter again? Any possibility there at all? Like, honestly, looking at it and where he's been, and through everything that he's been through after being with Baltimore to now and being a backup, does he come back from that? Really?
I think anything's possible. If Alex Smith can come back from 17 surgeries and be a starter for the Washington football team, and if Ryan Fitzpatrick can be a journeyman and still be a starting quarterback, and the Washington football team still has a desire to sign him, then there has to be hope for Joe Flacco to be a starter again in the National Football League, Joanna. It has to be.
Then again, you've seen the last week and a half of what's transpired in the NFL. I guess anything is possible.
Yes, Andy Dalton can go to Chicago and he can be a starter with the Chicago Bears, and all these other quarterbacks go all these different places. Why can't Joe Flacco have a year in Philadelphia if he gets some playing time and he plays well in the playing time he does have? That's more resume tape for him for another team that may be looking to pick him up in the 2022-23 season. We never know if Joe can stay healthy. There were times last year where he was okay with the New York Jets. He played well in that one game against the New England Patriots on the Monday night game. He had their best throwing game of the season, but he was okay. He was 0-4. I mean, the team they were good. They were goodness awful. I think they ended up 2-14, but they were awful that year. But Joe did what he could with what he had. He didn't really have that much as far as weapons are concerned. They had so many injuries, and they were just inconsistent all over the board. That's why their record was so poor. And Joe could only do so much with what he had.
Anything is possible.
Hope springs eternal for everybody, Joanna, even Joe Flacco.
Yes, indeed. So I'm happy for him. He has a 1-year deal. Eagles, I know the Eagles haven't been, at its best recently, too much. So we'll see where having Jalen Hurts and having Joe Flacco work, teaming up together, and where that puts the team in the upcoming season.
Yeah. So at least the cloud with Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz is gone. Both of those men are gone from the organization. They can move on. Jalen Hurts is the number one guy right now. They need to focus on getting Jalen Hurts ready for the upcoming season and get him prepared mentally and physically for the grind of being a number one starting quarterback. There's only 32 of them in the league, and he's one of them, and they have to get him ready for it.
Yes, indeed. And talking about getting ready, I'm going to go ahead and change topics here. I'm going to go into a little bit of boxing, getting ready here for Saul Canelo Alvarez, if you're a boxing fan here. He is going in, having a matchup here with Billy Joe Saunders in May. But there's some exciting news that happened over the weekend. So Canelo, he actually makes a little bit of history in the boxing world and the entertainment world in Hollywood. He has his hands of stone. He makes his impression at Grauman's Chinese Theater, which is a major feat as just being any type of entertainer to be able to obtain that. So he is, if you don't know Canelo, he is a world boxing champion. He just has a tremendous track record. And he is actually the first boxer since 1936 to be honored with such accomplishment here. He is a 4-division champion as well. So he's going to go off to fight here or face off Billy Joe Saunders on May 8th. The first boxer that actually was able to accomplish that was Victor McLaglen. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that well. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. But these honors are, given to actors, to include De Niro, Pacino, and so many others. So he's only 30 years old. He's had major, boxing accomplishments. He had his track record with total fights of 58, wins of 55, knockouts 37 with 1 loss. There's still more to come, and he's not over, and there's nothing that's stopping Canelo Alvarez.
Oh, goodness, no. His best years are ahead of him.
Yes, still. So with that, I want to go ahead and ask a question here. But before I ask that question, we have a friend PLR who is back, and I want to go ahead and ask him this. Mr. PLR, we're talking a little bit of Canelo here, who received his, he has his hands of stone in Hollywood, Roman's Chinese Theater. So if you know Julio Cesar Chavez, who that is, right?
Really? And,
guys,
and by the way, roving reporter PLR. Now go right ahead.
So I want to ask this because you are a boxing fan and you followed it. You know of Julio Cesar Chavez, who is, I probably wouldn't call him a god, but he just was in another era in his boxing. He had a total fights of 115 with 107 wins. 86 of those by way of knockout with only 6 losses. So although I am happy for Canelo Alvarez in accomplishing this in Hollywood and being given this honor, what is any different between Canelo Alvarez and Julio Cesar Chavez, who has even, you can say, double practically here of what he's accomplished? And why not give that? And why have you not given that to Julio Cesar Chavez, who was one of the best boxers out there?
Oh, wait a sec. So let me rephrase this so I make sure you have it right. You're saying, how do you give it to Canelo and you haven't given it to Julio Cesar Chavez?
Exactly.
Because someone's on crack. Is that an okay answer?
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, you take the pipe and then you fire it up, and then because you know what, it was a different era, and a lot of people don't realize boxers back then actually fought. It wasn't rare. It wasn't rare to see someone fight 3-4 times a year. Now guys fight so spread out, and it's so different. People act like when they see something now, it didn't happen before. And when I hear Hands of Stone, anyway, to be honest with you, I don't think Julio Cesar Chavez anyway. I think Roberto Duran. But when I think Hands of Stone, that's the first person that comes to my mind. But I don't see how you jump him in line. And that's not taking anything away from Canelo. Canelo's a very fine young fighter, but he hasn't accomplished what Chavez did. It's not even close. So I personally, I wouldn't understand how that could be possible. But now every era, the young people always think what they're seeing is better than what we've seen. There are certain guys that that dude was great. And I think what soils it for him too is hard to believe with all those fights. He ran into a little bit of money problems and had to team up with Don King to pay back money. And so people remember those last fights, not in the 80s when people were scared to fight him. I mean, Oscar De La Hoya ran from him till he was like 45 years old. Guys ran away from him because they didn't want to fight him. And then we talked about those guys like they are the best, like Oscar De La Hoya, but he wouldn't even fight the guy. He was called out and he wouldn't even fight the guy. So to me, that says a lot about, the guys of yesteryear. And there's no way. I'll say this, and this I mean as an insult. If Junior was half as good as Senior, he would be a halfway decent boxer. But he has no heart, and his dad was all heart. And he fought off his dad's name and made a whole lot of money fighting off his dad's name. And so that should tell people something right there, because he should be, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Chicken, because he ran from a lot of fights too.
Yeah. And just with the name that you dropped earlier, Roberto Duran, he has, I'm just going to go ahead and name his stats here. Total of 119 fights, 103 wins, 70 by knockout, and 16 losses.
Do me a favor, please. How many fights has Canelo fought?
Canelo has fought 58.
He has 58 fights. I once saw Roberto Duran fight 58 people in a night.
I'm sure he did.
His mama named him Roberto. I'm going to call him Roberto.
Oh, Roberto was a bad boy. Oh,
yes.
He was rugged.
You can't take anything away from Canelo. It's just not there yet.
Yeah, I don't take it away from him, and I'm happy. And he's what he's done in boxing and so far, and at the young age, yes, but he still has so much more to go. His career isn't over. So
let me ask you this.
I just thought I would bring that at top of a conversation, because how can you give it to someone whose career isn't over, and it's probably still, and just maybe not even in the middle of it, then I wouldn't say starting, and you're at the in that pivotal moment of your career, but you're not going to give it to like a Roberto Duran or Julio Cesar Chavez, who've done even more, and for what they stood for, and they broke those barriers and they opened the ways for boxers like Canelo.
Let me ask you guys a question, and we can tag team this, and we can do it in the speed round. Okay, Ed, when you think of Sugar Ray Leonard, what fight do you think of?
Roberto.
Okay. What about Roberto Duran? Who do you think of? Think of Sugar Ray. When you think of Marvin Hagler, you think of either Sugar Ray or Hearns. Let me ask you this: when you think of these great fighters, when you think of Ali, you think of Frazier, you think of all these great fighters they fought. And this isn't going to be a knock the way I say it, but in some ways it is. When you think of Canelo, his biggest fight ever, he lost to Mayweather. When you think about the biggest fight he had, his toughest opponent ever was an L. But when you think about Duran, you think about him beating Sugar Ray. Even though he lost to Sugar Ray, you think about him beating Sugar Ray. When you think about Hagler, you think about him beating Hearns. When you think about Sugar Ray, you think about him beating. You can conjure up in your mind these big fights where they fought these big names and they won. Same with Julio Chavez Jr., Alexis Arguello, Aaron Pryor, Tito. You can think of all their big fights and fights that they won. But when you think of Canelo, his biggest fight he lost. So how does he jump the line?
That's what I want to know.
That's a good question.
So
everyone that loves Canelo,
go ahead.
Everyone that loves Canelo will hate me now. But it wasn't meant as an insult. It just means that I think he needs more skin in the game to get. I think you got to have certain skin in the game to get a certain amount of recognition over guys that paved the way for you.
Exactly, and I totally agree with you, because I'm a Canelo fan. I like him. I like to see him fight, but it's nowhere by any means as close as what you saw back then whatsoever. And we're not even going to get close to seeing boxers now in this new era going up to those numbers, those 100 numbers of boxing matches and those wins and those type of knockouts, and the way that boxing was one time. That has changed so much.
Forever. It's changed forever.
Just thought I would bring it up, because yes, I do. I am happy for him. It's a great accomplishment, a major honor.
You are listening to Inside Sports Talk, where we translate sports to the core. Only here on KSRN, Arizona. Also, make sure to go download from wherever it is you listen to podcasts.
PLR. So just going back to your, you went off to do a little info taking for us for the Diamondbacks.
Roving reporter.
What do you have to report
thank you.
Here?
Well, thank you, Ed. Roving reporter, PLR. Torrey talked about hitting. He talked about timely hitting. He talked about patience. Kelly was on the mound. He talked about him letting him get through innings, fight through a couple things. not real specific about anything, but he said he felt good. He looked